The unusual candidates. Commander Alara Vex stood at the observation window of the Galactic Defense Academy's arrival bay, her crystalline form refracting the starlight as she watched the approaching transport ship. After 3 centuries of instructing the galaxy's finest military minds, she thought she had seen everything. She was wrong. The transport's hull gleamed as it docked, its sleek design bearing the unmistakable mark of Earth engineering. Earth, a death world that had somehow produced a spacefaring civilization, a planet whose inhabitants had survived conditions that would have exterminated most species. And now they were sending their first cadets to the Academy. Quite the day for history, isn't it? Academic Director Zorn's gravelly voice buzzed from behind her. The arthropodian administrator clicked his mandibles thoughtfully as he joined her at the window. History or headache, Director? Alara's crystalline surface rippled with concern. These humans, they're from a planet with gravity nearly twice our standard. Their bones are dense enough to shatter our training equipment. And yet, Zorn chittered, their application scores were remarkable. The transport's doors hissed open. Alara watched as 5 figures emerged, their movements careful but confident in the station's lighter gravity. They seemed so small compared to the towering Xenthians or the massive cruel cadets, yet something about their bearing made her outer layers bristle. First came Maya Chen, skin dark as space itself, moving with a predator's grace despite her diminutive size. Behind her, twins Sarah and James Wilson, their red hair marking them as distinctly human. Then Alexander Petrov, built like a cruel warrior, but in miniature. Finally, Diane Rodriguez, her eyes already darting around, analyzing, calculating. "They don't look like much," muttered Sub-Commander Crix, his tentacles writhing with disapproval as he joined them at the window. "Neither does a quantum torpedo," Zorn responded dryly. "Yet both can reshape reality as we know it." The humans gathered their belongings, surprisingly minimal for beings from a consumer society, and began moving toward processing. Alara noticed how they automatically formed a defensive formation, watching each other's blind spots. They hadn't been told to do this. They hadn't been trained yet. They just did it. "Their psychological profiles are fascinating," Zorn continued, pulling up a holographic display. "They process fear differently than any species we've encountered. Instead of triggering a flight response, danger often produces heightened focus and aggressive problem-solving." "You mean they get more dangerous when they're scared?" Crix's tentacles went pale. "Precisely. And they're always scared, always aware of their mortality. It's what happens when you evolve on a death world." Zorn's mandibles clicked in what might have been appreciation. "They call it anxiety. The constant awareness that everything might kill you." Alara watched as Maya Chen helped a stumbling Xenthian cadet, catching the much larger alien with surprising strength. "They're so contradictory, aggressive yet protective, fragile yet durable, individual yet collective. The question is," Crix interjected, "can they follow orders? Can they integrate into our command structure?" The humans had reached the processing station. The automated system, designed for a dozen different alien physiologies, seemed to puzzle them for exactly 3 seconds. Then Rodriguez stepped forward, her fingers dancing across the interface. The system's lights flickered, and suddenly all 5 processing pods activated simultaneously. "I don't think," Alara said slowly, her crystalline form shimmering with something between amusement and concern, "that following orders will be their problem. I think their problem will be following them in ways we never imagined possible." "Well," Zorn's mandibles curved in what passed for a smile among his species, "that's why they're here, isn't it? To show us new possibilities." As if on cue, a small explosion echoed from the processing station. Through the smoke, they could see Rodriguez grinning sheepishly, while holding what appeared to be a significantly improved processing scanner. "New possibilities," Alara sighed, her crystal structure vibrating with what might have been laughter. "Or the end of the Academy as we know it." The humans gathered their now processed belongings, and moved toward the orientation hall, leaving behind a wake of bewildered aliens and modified equipment. Alara couldn't help but notice how they moved, not like cadets, but like veterans, not like students, but like teachers. "Director," she said finally, "I believe we may need to revise the entire curriculum." "Oh." Zorn's antennae twitched with interest. Yes, Alara watched as the humans disappeared around a corner, already arguing about optimal route calculations and structural improvements to the station. "Because I don't think we're teaching them." She turned to face her superior, her crystalline form catching the light of a nearby sun. "I think they're about to teach us." The director's mandibles clicked rapidly, the arthropodian equivalent of laughter. "My dear Commander, I believe that was the point all along." Breaking protocol. 3 days into basic training, Commander Alara Vex began to understand why humans had survived on their death world. They simply refused to accept limitations. They did what? Her crystalline form pulsed with infrared spikes of disbelief as she reviewed Sub-Commander Crix's report. "They improved the combat simulator, Commander." Crix's tentacles twisted nervously. Cadet Rodriguez claimed it wasn't realistic enough. The combat simulator, a piece of technology that had taken the combined efforts of 12 species to perfect over 3 centuries, had been fundamentally altered in less than 6 hours by a single human, while the rest of her team was supposedly sleeping. "Show me," Alara commanded. The simulation chamber was barely recognizable. Where before it had generated standard combat scenarios, now it seemed to pulse with an almost organic energy. Cadet Rodriguez stood in the center, her dark hair tied back, hands covered in mechanical grease. "Oh, hello, Commander." Rodriguez beamed. "I hope you don't mind, but I noticed the gravity variations weren't accounting for planetary rotation effects, and the atmospheric pressure simulations were way too uniform, so I made a few tweaks." "A few tweaks," Alara repeated flatly. She gestured at the completely reorganized chamber. "You call this a few tweaks?" "Well, yeah." Rodriguez shrugged. "Maya helped with the biological response algorithms. Did you know your system wasn't accounting for adrenaline spikes? And the twins figured out how to incorporate actual terrain deformation. Alex mostly just broke things so we could fix them better." Before Alara could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. She whirled toward the sound, her crystalline structure resonating with the alert frequency. "Training Squad 7 has requested emergency evacuation," the AI announced. "Multiple casualties reported in advanced survival course." "That's the Xanthian squad." Crix's tentacles paled. "They're in the artificial jungle environment." "The what?" Rodriguez was already moving, her hands flying over a control panel. "You put them in a high-humidity environment during their molt cycle." Alara felt her structure freeze. The Xanthians. Their molt cycle. How had they missed? "Maya, James, we've got live ones." Rodriguez was shouting into her comm unit as she ran. The other humans seemed to materialize from nowhere, converging on the environmental chamber's entrance. "Protocol dictates we wait for the medical team," Crix began, but the humans were already gone. Through the monitoring screens, Alara watched in astonishment as the 5 humans navigated the artificial jungle. They moved like water, flowing around obstacles, communicating in short, sharp phrases that seemed more like code than language. "Chen, thermal scan. 6 signatures, scattered. 2 critical. Twins, take point. Alex, we need an exit. Working on it." Maya Chen reached the first Xanthian cadet, her small form somehow supporting the much larger alien. The twins split up, moving with impossible speed through the dense foliage. Petrov simply started tearing down walls, creating a direct path to the medical bay. "Commander," Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. "Your environmental controls are locked into a feedback loop. Permission to hack the system. That's a Class 1 secured." The lights flickered, and suddenly the humidity levels plummeted. Through the screens, Alara watched as the Xanthian cadets began to stabilize. "Sorry, didn't catch that last part." Rodriguez said, not sounding sorry at all. Was busy preventing multiple deaths. Within 15 minutes, all 6 Senthian cadets were safely in the medical bay. The humans stood outside, covered in mud and various alien biological fluids, discussing ways to prevent similar incidents. The environmental systems need complete overhaul, Rodriguez was saying, sketching diagrams in the air. We can't just simulate standard conditions. We need to account for every species' biological cycles. The emergency protocols are too rigid, Chen added. We need adaptive response systems. And better exits, Petrov rumbled. Lots better exits. Director Zorn appeared, his mandibles clicking rapidly as he surveyed the scene. Commander Vex, report. Alara's crystalline form shifted through several colors before settling. Sir, the humans have violated approximately 37 protocols, altered secure systems without authorization, and completely disregarded the chain of command. And prevented what could have been a tragic training accident. They identified a problem our systems missed, responded faster than our emergency teams, and are now proposing solutions to prevent future incidents. Zorn watched as the humans, apparently bored with waiting, began installing improvements to the medical bay's monitoring systems. Fascinating. They're not just solving problems, they're anticipating them. Sir, Alara's voice lowered. Traditional training methods won't work with them. They don't just think outside the box. They refuse to acknowledge the box exists. Then perhaps, Zorn said, his antennae twitching thoughtfully, it's time we stop trying to put them in one. As if to emphasize his point, a small explosion echoed from the medical bay, followed by Rodriguez's voice. Don't worry. That was supposed to happen. Probably. Alara watched as the humans continued their work, their movements swift and sure, their minds clearly already focused on the next problem to solve. They weren't following the rules. They were rewriting them. And somehow, impossibly, they were making everything better in the process. Director, she said finally, I believe we need to prepare for the Omega simulation. Zorn's mandibles clicked in surprise. They're not ready. No squad has ever completed it. Alara's crystalline form caught the light, splitting it into a rainbow of possibilities. Exactly. And I think that's precisely why these humans will. The ultimate test. The Omega simulation chamber loomed before them, its massive doors sealed with warnings in 12 different languages. Commander Alara Vex watched as her 5 human cadets studied the entrance, their expressions unnervingly calm. The Omega simulation, she began, her crystalline form vibrating with the gravity of the moment, has never been completed. Not once in the Academy's 1,000-year history. What's the success criteria? Rodriguez asked, already scanning the chamber's external systems with a device she'd apparently built from spare parts. Survival. Director Zorn clicked, his mandibles twitching. The simulation presents an impossible tactical scenario. The goal is to last as long as possible while gathering combat data. Maya Chen's eyes narrowed. Define impossible. You face an enemy fleet that outnumbers you 1,000 to 1. Your resources are limited. Your ship is damaged. There is no backup, no rescue, no escape route. Alara watched their reactions carefully. The longest any team has lasted is 43 minutes. The humans exchanged glances. Then, to her astonishment, they smiled. So, James Wilson said, Tuesday on Earth. His twin sister Sarah snorted. More like a slow Monday. The simulation begins in 1 hour, Zorn announced. You may use this time to prepare. We're ready now. Petrov interrupted, cracking his knuckles. Alara's structure rippled with concern. Cadet, this simulation has broken veteran commanders. You need time, Toe. Time is a resource, Rodriguez said, already typing on her modified console. And you said our resources are limited, so let's not waste any. The observation deck filled quickly as word spread that the human squad was attempting the Omega simulation. Alien officers and cadets crowded the viewing areas, their varied physiologies creating a mosaic of anticipation and skepticism. They're not even wearing proper battle gear, Sub-Commander Crix observed, his tentacles writhing anxiously. Indeed, the humans had declined the standard combat suits. Rodriguez wore what appeared to be modified maintenance coveralls, festooned with tools and devices. The twins were in light training gear, while Chen had opted for something that looked suspiciously like Earth workout clothes. Petrov wore only a tank top and cargo pants, his muscled arms crossed casually. Beginning simulation in 3, 2, 1. The AI's voice echoed through the chamber. The massive doors sealed with a hiss of finality. The holographic battlefield materialized around them, a damaged light cruiser surrounded by an endless sea of enemy vessels. Warning alerts blared from every console. System failures cascaded across the displays. Well, Rodriguez grinned, they certainly know how to set a mood. What happened next would be debated in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Rodriguez didn't even look at the tactical displays. Instead, she dove under the main console, ripping open panels with practiced ease. Hey Alex, remember that thing we talked about? With the quantum field generators, the thing you said would probably violate several laws of physics. Petrov was already moving to the engine room access panel. That's the one. Chen had taken the pilot's seat, her hands dancing across the controls with impossible speed. The twins positioned themselves at weapons and communications, moving with the synchronized grace of longtime partners. They're not following any known combat doctrine, one of the observing admirals muttered. They're not following any known laws of physics either, another added as Rodriguez's modifications caused the ship's quantum signature to split into multiple frequencies. Through the viewing screens, they watched as the human cadets turned what should have been a desperate last stand into something else entirely. Rodriguez and Petrov had somehow reconfigured the ship's damaged systems into what they casually termed a probability manipulation field. The twins were using the communications array to broadcast what appeared to be contradictory sensor data, causing enemy ships to fire on each other. And Chen was flying the ship like it was an extension of her own body, executing maneuvers that should have torn the vessel apart. That's not possible, Crix whispered as they watched the ship phase partially through what should have been solid matter. The power requirements alone. They're not trying to win. Alara realized suddenly, her crystalline form bright with understanding. They're changing the parameters of what's possible. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. Hey, quick question. If we convert the entire ship into a quantum uncertainty state, does that count as destroying it? Cadet, Alara began. That's not. A blinding flash filled the simulation chamber. When it cleared, the enemy fleet was in chaos. Half the ships had disappeared. The other half appeared to be merging with alternate timeline versions of themselves. Sorry, what were you saying? Rodriguez asked innocently. We were busy exploiting the quantum uncertainty principle to create a localized reality distortion. 23 minutes, Director Zorn announced, his mandibles clicking rapidly. They've effectively neutralized an impossible threat in 23 minutes. Neutralized? Sarah Wilson's voice was amused. Oh no, we're just getting started. James, show them what we did with the background radiation. The simulation's parameters began to fluctuate wildly as the humans implemented what they later termed creative problem-solving techniques. Reality itself seemed to bend around their innovations. Commander, Chen called out casually as she executed another reality-defying maneuver. Your simulation has a few bugs. Want us to fix them while we're in here? Alara watched as her human cadets systematically dismantled every assumption the Omega simulation was built upon. They weren't just thinking outside the box. They were redefining the nature of boxes themselves. And they were enjoying every minute of it. Director, she said quietly, I believe we may need to reconsider our definition of impossible. Zorn's antennae twitched in agreement. Indeed, Commander. Though I suspect these humans already have. The simulation continued, But everyone watching knew that something fundamental had changed. The impossible had become merely improbable, and the humans were working on that too. The galaxy, Alara realized, would never be quite the same. 15 minutes of revolution. The emergency meeting of the Academy's High Council was called before the simulation chamber had even finished powering down. Commander Alara Vex stood before the assembled dignitaries, her crystalline form cycling through colors as she struggled to put the impossible into words. They broke it. Admiral Cathax of the 7th Fleet stated flatly, all four of his eyes fixed on the replay hologram. They broke reality itself. Technically, Rodriguez's voice chimed in from the back of the chamber, where the 5 humans had been ordered to wait. We just bent it a little. Reality's pretty flexible, if you ask nicely. Nicely. Sub-Commander Crix's tentacles were still pale from witnessing the simulation. You turned the quantum field generators into a probability manipulation device. Actually, Sarah Wilson raised her hand. That was just to distract you from what we really did. The room fell silent. Even the ambient hum of the station's systems seemed to hold its breath. Explain. Director Zorn commanded, his mandibles clicking rapidly. The humans exchanged glances. Then Rodriguez stepped forward, pulling up a holographic display of her own design. The Omega simulation was designed to be impossible because it follows conventional rules of engagement. But the thing about rules is, she grinned, they're more like guidelines. The display showed their ship, surrounded by the enemy fleet. But as Rodriguez manipulated the image, new layers of data became visible. First, we noticed that the simulation's quantum processors maintain coherence at a macro level, she explained, which means reality itself is actually just a consensus of probabilities. She paused, searching for words, convinced those probabilities to cooperate. You can't just convince quantum mechanics, one of the physicist advisors protested. Sure you can, James Wilson shrugged. You just have to speak its language, which is math. Really, really weird math. Chen took over the explanation, her movements precise as she manipulated the display. While Rodriguez and Petrov were playing with quantum fields, we were actually rewriting the simulation's base code, not just the scenario parameters, the fundamental rules it operates on. But that's locked behind Class 1 security protocols. Crix protested. Is it? Rodriguez looked genuinely surprised. Oops, my bad. We'll put them back. Probably better ones, actually. The encryption was kind of basic. Alara watched as her cadets systematically explained how they had not just beaten the unbeatable scenario. They had fundamentally altered what unbeatable meant. They hadn't just thought outside the box. They had redesigned the entire concept of containment. Director, she said finally, I believe we need to consider the implications of what just happened. Indeed, Zorn's antennae twitched thoughtfully. They've demonstrated that our entire approach to military doctrine may be outdated. Outdated? Admiral Cathax scoffed. They turned our most advanced training simulation into a quantum physics experiment. With respect, Admiral, Petrov spoke for the first time, his deep voice carrying across the chamber. We turned it into a victory. The room erupted in argument. Dozens of alien species debating the implications of what they'd witnessed. Through it all, the humans stood calmly, occasionally whispering among themselves and making notes on their devices. Order. Director Zorn's voice cut through the chaos. Cadets, approach. The 5 humans stepped forward, standing at what might have been attention if they weren't all still typing on various devices or sketching designs in the air. You have violated numerous protocols, ignored direct orders, and completely disregarded thousands of years of established military doctrine, Zorn stated, his mandibles clicking slowly. You have also achieved what was thought to be impossible, potentially revolutionized our understanding of quantum mechanics, and demonstrated problem-solving abilities that border on the miraculous. Rodriguez opened her mouth, probably to explain exactly how unmiraculous their solutions were, but Chen elbowed her quietly. "The question before us," Zorn continued, "is what to do with you." "Well," Maya Chen said thoughtfully, "we have some ideas about improving the Academy's entire curriculum. For starters, your approach to multidimensional physics is way too conservative. And the emergency protocols could use a complete overhaul," Sara added. "Plus," James chimed in, "we've been thinking about the cafeteria's food synthesizers." Alara's crystalline form vibrated with what might have been laughter or fear. At this point, even she wasn't sure which. Her humans, and somehow, they had become her humans, were already planning their next revolution. "Director," she said, "I believe we have two choices. We can either try to force these humans to conform to our existing systems, or," Cathax prompted, "or we can acknowledge that they're going to change everything anyway, and try to keep up." The humans beamed at her, their expressions suggesting they had at least a dozen more reality-bending ideas just waiting to be implemented. "Now," Rodriguez said brightly, pulling up another holographic display, "about those quantum field generators. A new era begins." 1 month after the Omega simulation incident, the Galactic Defense Academy was unrecognizable. Commander Alara Vex stood in what had once been the main training hall, watching as her human cadets demonstrated their latest improvements to a crowd of wide-eyed alien officials. "The problem with traditional combat training," Rodriguez was explaining, her hands dancing through a holographic interface of her own design, "is that it assumes a linear relationship between cause and effect. Reality is much more interesting than that." The demonstration area shimmered, transforming into what she called a probability combat arena. Alien cadets moved through the space, their actions creating ripples of quantum possibility that the humans had somehow made visible. "As you can see," Chen added from her position at the controls, "every decision creates multiple potential outcomes. Traditional training only prepares you for one. We prepare you for all of them." Director Zorn, standing beside Alara, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "In 1 month, they've advanced our training methods by centuries." "That's not all they've advanced," Alara responded, her crystalline form shimmering with a mixture of pride and amazement. Indeed, the humans' influence had spread far beyond combat training. The Academy's quantum communications network now operated on principles that the galaxy's best physicists were still trying to understand. The medical bay had been completely redesigned to accommodate the biological quirks of every known species, and several that hadn't been discovered yet, because, as Rodriguez put it, "It's better to be prepared." "You know what's really interesting?" James Wilson's voice carried across the hall as he demonstrated a new tactical system. "Every species has its own way of breaking the rules. We just showed them it was okay to try." He was right. In the wake of the human success, other cadets had begun pushing boundaries they'd never questioned before. A Xenthian squad had developed a new form of biotechnology by studying how Rodriguez bypassed security protocols. A team of cruel warriors had revolutionized their ancient combat forms after watching Chen's impossible piloting techniques. They're not just teaching new methods, Alara realized. They're teaching new ways of thinking. "Incoming priority transmission," the station's AI announced suddenly. "Vexor battle fleet detected at the edge of controlled space. Estimated time to intercept, 6 hours." The room froze. The Vexor, cybernetically enhanced warriors who had terrorized the galaxy for generations. Even the most hardened veterans paled at their mention. But the humans smiled. Finally, Petrov cracked his knuckles. "A chance to test our improvements in real combat." "Cadets," Admiral Cathax began, "the Vexor are not a training exercise. They are a bunch of cyborgs who think having better technology makes them invincible." Rodriguez interrupted, already pulling up ship schematics. "But you know what's better than having advanced technology? Understanding how to make it do things it was never designed to do." The twins finished in unison. Alara watched as her human cadets sprang into action, their movements precise and coordinated. Rodriguez and Petrov headed for the engine rooms, talking rapidly about quantum entanglement cascades. The twins made for the weapons systems, while Chen began reconfiguring the defense grid. "Director," Alara said, "I believe we should let them handle this." Zorn's antennae twitched with surprise. "They're still cadets." "Are they?" She gestured at the organized chaos around them. "Look at how the other cadets are responding." Indeed, throughout the station, alien cadets were moving with new purpose, implementing strategies and technologies that would have been unthinkable a month ago. The humans hadn't just changed themselves, they had changed everyone around them. "The Vexor expect us to fight according to known parameters," Chen's voice carried across the command center. "So let's introduce them to some new ones." "Hey, Commander," Rodriguez called out, her hands deep in what appeared to be a partially disassembled reality. "Remember how you said we couldn't actually break physics?" "Yes," Alara responded warily. "Well, about that," Rodriguez grinned. "We figured out how to make physics break itself. Want to see?" As the station hummed with preparations, as impossible technologies sprang to life under human hands, as alien cadets moved with newfound confidence and creativity, Alara felt her crystalline form vibrate with an emotion she hadn't experienced in centuries. Hope. The Vexor were coming, yes, but they were about to encounter something they had never faced before. A galaxy that had learned to think like humans. "You know," Director Zorn mused, watching as Rodriguez casually rewrote the laws of quantum mechanics, "perhaps we should rename the academy." "Oh." Alara's structure shifted curiously. "Yes, after all, we're not just defending the galaxy anymore." He gestured at the organized chaos around them, at the humans teaching aliens to break reality in new and interesting ways, at the perfect blend of innovation and determination that had become their legacy. "We're reimagining it." In the distance, the Vexor fleet approached, unaware that they were about to encounter not just a defense station, but a revolution. A revolution sparked by 5 humans who had looked at the impossible and seen only possibilities. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, Alara realized, watching her cadets prepare to rewrite reality once again, was exactly the point.